Oh, hello, Paul.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. Welcome to Leaders Live. I appreciate you taking your time to come on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome virtual setup we both have here. I got a lot of flowers in the background. The mirror, flowers. Just a little background why we do the show. Talk with uh, decision makers, business leaders, understand how they operate, and try to connect them with other like-minded business professionals. We are on LinkedIn Live. We're streaming on Entra's YouTube page, which is our affiliate networking group, which brings entrepreneurs together with other entrepreneurs looking for co-founders and engineers or anything like that. So join Entra.com for anyone who's checking that out. What I will say is we have a great entrepreneur on the show today, and this will live on LinkedIn and on other platforms. So if you have any questions, definitely submit them on LinkedIn, submit them on any other platform, say hello on the platform that you're on, and tag somebody that should be watching this, but definitely check in so that we could see that you're here, and that we could ask any of the questions that you got for the show. So Paul, thank you again. A little background: Forbes 30 under 30. You are a serial entrepreneur and CEO of Physna right now, also founder of Zoozler. Let's give a little context, at least, from what you've been doing. I mean, you've been an entrepreneur since the age of 16. Can you bring us back there, and then we'll work into Physna?
Sure. Yeah, and by the way, everyone pronounces it Physna, but it's actually pronounced Physna. It's for no worries. Everyone does it. It's fine.
I just asked you.
I know. It's okay. Don't worry about it. It's easy. It's easy to mispronounce. So yeah, at the age of 16, it was a big transition point for me because I used to be homeschooled, and I was self-taught, so I was kind of isolated. And at 16, I got to go out and I got to go to college. I did it. I did a couple courses earlier. When you're homeschooled, you can kind of skip over a couple of topics a little bit, like history or English literature if you're not interested in that so much, and you can go into the sciences. So I was able to study. Very briefly, I went to Harvard for a semester there, and I was studying astronomy and astrophysics. I was really a nerd, I guess you could say, and then later on decided, I didn't really I wanted to kind of see the world more. I wanted to do more of my life, and did a year abroad in Switzerland, and then that turned into 10 years in Germany going to law school. And it's a really long story, but to fund all of that and make it possible, even if you get a scholarship, you have to live. And I decided that, the easiest way to do it was going to be starting my own company, which at that age was just tutoring people. I used to be okay at the guitar. Now I haven't practiced in so long, I'd be horrible at it. But after I learned German, I was able to tutor that. And when I was over there, I was able to tutor English. And after a while, I realized there were, why am I doing all the work myself? There are a lot of people who need other help, help in other ways, and started a tutoring company that later on merged and became a corporate training company, which later became more of a tech company. And then later on started a translation business that became also a tech company. And then those two merged and went off somewhere. And then I started another company that later became Zoozler, and that started out as a product actually in partnership with a company over in Germany, and moved back to the U.S. And that there was an issue with a company that we worked with in Germany. Long story short, we ended up it was a $40 million deal. We ended up kind of losing it. And it's a long story as to why, but it's not on us, it's on them. But still, we were overly reliant on this one company, and we decided to make money. We had to turn Zoozler into a service company. We I started several, obviously at this point, several companies before, and I decided I was going to help startups get started and work with big companies. We helped launch over 40 startups and major products at large companies. And then one of the things that we helped with at the beginning was Physna, and that's a little bit different story how we got there. But in a nutshell, the way that Physna came to be was I had an idea from being in German law. Again, I'm skipping over a lot for the sake of brevity, because I could talk about the weird backstory there for about an hour if I were to not stop myself. But the way that Physna got started was, I had an idea from law school, which was we were never able to find patent infringement ahead of time. It was always, you'd sue somebody because they actually produced something that you had a patent on. everything else, though, like plagiarism or someone stealing your logo or music, we could find right away because of algorithms. And we couldn't do the same for patents. So I thought, well, we could create a tool that would allow people to automatically find cases of patent infringement before the part is ever manufactured, and therefore save people lots and lots and lots of money from not having to go into a patent lawsuit later. It's about $10 trillion a year globally is lost to patent infringement in the economy. So it's a really big problem. And, you know, I was already kind of back here, and but that really settled it. I was going to be staying in the U.S. and found my co-founder at the time, Glenn Warner, who, so again, a long story. He unfortunately passed away last year, but we got together and decided we were going to start this company called Physna, which is short for physical DNA, and solve that problem. And it took a lot of time and a lot of money, a lot of our own money, a lot of money, especially my own money. Went into debt for the first time in my life to get this company off the ground. And we built the technology. We tried out everything that was in the market. Nothing worked the way I was thinking it would. To actually find 3D models with 3D models, it's a long story as to why. But we were able to, and essentially what we built was the system that allows you to take 3D data, you know, about the whole world around us, and normalize that into code. So we're codifying the physical world essentially. And that's why we call it physical DNA, because we can understand how these parts relate to each other. And I can find a complicated assembly with a component of it, or even if it's not an assembly, if it's just a single part, but it has some geometry in it, I can find it with that, and I can relate the two, and I can use machine learning on that. And there's a lot you can do with geometric deep learning. So we built this product, and we went to IMTS, which is a conference up in Chicago that's had every 2 years. And we went around talking to people about this thing that we built. And I'm telling everybody, hey, this is great. This will protect your intellectual property. And it was really weird because I've, you know, had other ideas before and started other companies before. And I've talked to a lot of people at trade shows, and they normally don't really want to talk to you. But they were very open to talking about this. And it wasn't because of the use case so much. I mean, it is a useful use case, but they were very fascinated by the technology. And we found from just talking to a few people, and within 30 days, we were contacted, even after the show was over, and we collected over 20 use cases that were ranging from quality control automation to CAD, you know, engineering automation or reuse of designs that you've done in the past, that other people have designed in the past, to supply chain automation, being able to identify what people can supply which parts, making sure that you're not ordering duplicate parts from different companies. To maintenance, seeing how parts go together. What is this random thing on the floor? How does that go back into the thing it fell off of? Where does it go? What does that belong to? And a lot more use cases than that. And we realized, well, we can't build out all those use cases, but we built kind of like little demo products for different types of them. And we eventually decided that, you know, the best long-term strategy was to use our technology, which is a new category, really. We make the world understand, or make software understand the world around it, right? And bridging that gap between digital and physical is really cool because it allows you to do so much stuff. And economically speaking, is a big deal because over 70% of the economy is physical goods, and only about 1% of software, if that, less than 1% of software, can actually deal with 3D models, which is what's used to, you know, create these 3D goods. So there's this big disconnect between the information technology world and the world. And we kind of helped to bridge that, and we decided, let's make a platform that other people can use. But we have to have, if you think of it in terms of like a solar system almost, you know, Google did the same thing. They had a technology that was really powerful, but they had to give people a use case for it. So we thought, well, let's go ahead and build something people can use, an application, if you will, for this technology, build it all the way through, and then we'll go from there. And so we did. We built Physna, which now is used by engineers for you know, when they're designing things. It helps them reuse designs and components they've used in the past, find other parts and models with their database, connecting PLM systems and the like. It helps predict the cost of parts, where to manufacture parts, how to manufacture them. It helps you identify, you know, what parts you need to order from whom. Alternative for the supply chain, which right now during coronavirus is a really big deal. And it helps you to figure out what things are in the field. So that's kind of how we got to where we are. I know that was a very long ramble. So
there's a lot to take in there. There's a lot to take in and dissect right now. But I mean, you're talking about the use cases. Let's just stick with that right now. Some of the clients you're working with, you said, are some defense, military types of uses. But can you give a little bit of example of how these clients or companies are using Physna and how it's working the best?
Yeah, sure. So I would really say it boils down to three general types of use cases. One is, the types of customers are really anyone who makes a physical good, either an OEM or a manufacturer, or, so it can be anything from like a, footwear designer or to a defense contractor to a defense agency or something. Sure. And so as long as they have something to do with something physical. And there's three types of use cases in those companies, and they stretch between engineers, which is, again, product engineers, product designers, people who work with CAD. And what we do is kind of think of it like autofill almost for 3D, right? You don't have to redesign something from scratch. You can find other parts you've worked with in the past. This doesn't sound like all that big of a deal, but it actually accounts for at least 50% of the average person's day finding models or reworking the models so they didn't know they had them already. But if you actually compound that into other side effects that has in engineering, there are actually studies that show that engineers of mechanical or physical parts are only 1/5 as productive as software engineers. And it's not because software engineers are 5 times smarter. It's because software engineers have tools, simple tools that mechanical engineers don't have. Like they'll never rewrite code twice. Typically, they don't have to. They can find things really easily. They can correlate things very easily and figure out where code snippets are used. Mechanical engineers don't really have the ability to do that unless they manually store it the exact same way for every single person across a huge organization. And the partner organizations are the same, which isn't reality at all. So we help them with that. And then and that also helps us with the supply chain part, because we can tell them, hey, you've got duplicates in your database. So you have duplicate parts, they have different names, or you might have same names, but they're different parts. And we can show them the differences and show them which parts are, if there are any differences, they're duplicates, they might not have differences. But it allows them to identify, hey, I've got 500 parts that have different names, but they're really the same part. And I can order that in a larger quantity and potentially from more vendors than I realized I could, because it doesn't have to be 500 different vendors for 500 different parts. It's one part, and I have 500 vendors to choose from. And then for other people who've never used 3D before, the really cool thing about Physna is that we can take this complicated CAD model, and we don't actually simplify it. It's simplified when you look at it, but we actually take a lot of data out of it. And so we actually gain data from what you can see. And but we present it in a simpler way so that so a very common thing is that people, even in sales and marketing, have a use for Physna, even though they've never touched a 3D model or a CAD model in their lives. They have no idea how their PLM system works or what PLM even is, right? And thus, the majority of people, they don't understand it, they're not used to it, but we're opening up that use case and making it very, very simple. So you can look at a model and say, tell me about this features, tell me about what this model is likely to do, make predictions about this model, and you don't have to have a person do it manually. So it's really helpful throughout the entire life cycle of a thing, of a product.
Right. Let's talk about a little bit. You know how to scale a business. You know how to grow a business. You've done it multiple times, from teaching people Stairway to Heaven to different languages. But
it's hard time to teach people, by the way. Yeah.
Hiring is a big thing, obviously. Scaling, growth. How do you look at that, and what do you tell entrepreneurs or other business founders tips on how to do that and how it's worked for you?
Yeah, I'm really careful to make sure that I try to give people the most useful advice that I can, right? It's really easy to give people 500 bits of information, say, do this, do this, do that, do that. And, what worked for me doesn't necessarily work for everybody else. Every business is a little bit different. What really matters are the foundations. And, most of how you perform in a business is going to depend on your mindset, not so much on your tactics that you've memorized. And the reason that's true is because you can have all the strategies in the world, you could memorize them, but if you don't have enough energy to get out of bed in the morning, you're not going to use any of them. And by contrast, if you have the perfect mindset for running a business and you don't know anything at all about how to, that mindset will push you towards finding that information. So, and mindset's not something that you're born with, it's something that you have to train. It's a muscle. There might be there is surely some degree of inborn mentality in everybody, but in general, you can train your muscle, just like any your brain, just like any other muscle. And so mindset's important. And I typically tell people to focus on the goal first, and then work your way backwards, because we're programmed by society and just naturally, because for evolutionary reasons, we've been programmed to think in terms of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, when really what you need to do is start at, okay, I want to get to 5, which means I need to get to 4, which means I need to get to 3, then 2, then 1. Oh, I need to go from 0 to 1. And when you're planning long term, that's how you have to do it. And then short term, you can go 1, 2, 3, but you have to know long term what your goals are before you even set out. And most people think in the other direction. So I tell people to do that. I typically focus on mindset, and I think that when it comes to scaling, it's absolutely true, because scaling is complicated and scaling is different for every single company. The underlying principles are the same, but you're going to run into different issues. Every time I scaled a company, there were slightly different issues. So I don't believe anybody who says, "Oh, I can scale any company in the world without an issue." No, you're going to run into issues, and if you think you know everything, one thing that I really think is important is that when it comes to learning from others, mentors and whatnot, is that if you think that you're beyond the level where you can learn from somebody, you think that you're above other people, or that you can't learn from literally every single human being, then the minute you decide that, you're obsolete, right? Because it's not true. You're a student for life. And so I encourage people to keep in mind that they're students, that I'm a student, and advice that I give is not sacred. It's just my own experiences, what they're worth. And same thing goes for what you read in books. But one thing I think you can really train people on, and that really matters, especially when you're scaling, is having the right mentality about it.
Well, tell me a little bit about that. I got the baby crying in the background while we speak. You talk about two things I want to jump back into, is the mindset, having the right mindset. So how do you have the right mindset? How do you figure out how do you sharpen that mindset? And then sorry about that. And then how do you set goals? You talked about being a multi-billion-dollar business. You think 10 years from now you're going to be a multi-billion-dollar business, which is a lofty goal. I like that. But how do you set those goals? So how do you get your mindset, and then the goals?
Sure. So the first thing to realize is that we're all, literally animals. We've evolved, probably stopped evolving around, no one really knows, we can estimate 50,000 years ago. So our minds are built to think of fear as a life and death situation, and it's not. If your business fails, or if you don't get a deal, or something doesn't go your way, you're not dead. Like, it's not like you're going out and you made the wrong turn, so you ran into a saber-toothed tiger, or you were being kicked out of the tribe. So the chemicals in your brain, the oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, et cetera, cortisol, these things are what really drive you to do things, and we typically justify things later with logic. So what you have to do is train yourself to think the right way, and to almost fight against those evolutionary instincts. And the first step in fighting them is realizing them for what they are, acknowledging them for what they are. So overcoming fear isn't that you don't fear anymore, it's just that you realize what emotion you're feeling and why. And then you use that differently. You say, okay, I'm afraid of doing this, but maybe that's actually a sign that it's something worth pursuing. It's such a lofty goal. Saying publicly on something that's going to go to the whole world, I want us to be a multi-billion-dollar business in 10 years. A lot of people will be very afraid to do that, because if you ask me in 10 years if I'm a multi-billion-dollar company and I say no, then everyone knows that I just failed, right? So, but that's not something that concerns me. And I think that, so understanding where your mentality comes from, and that you're a product of evolution, is the important first step. But the second step is to think about things a little bit more macro. So working your way back from goals backwards, to also understanding there's a difference between companies there's a difference between tactics and strategies, and by the same token, there's a difference between companies that can scale up to, say, a millionaire level. You can become a millionaire, I'm not gonna say easily, but you can do it in a lot of ways. Becoming a billionaire requires something a little bit different. So I think there's a difference between two mentalities, a millionaire mentality and a billionaire mentality. But it's simple. And really, there's a very simple difference. One is millionaires don't have to think as long term. I'm not saying that if you're a millionaire, you fit into this category. You could be a millionaire on your way to be a billionaire, right? But you're not going to be over a millionaire or over a multimillionaire if you think this way, which is not super long term, and you're not thinking very much strategically as much as tactically And what that means is that you're willing to do things that are strategically dumb in the long run, like take advantage of people. You have a mindset of, instead of looking at companies and people and saying, how can I help them with my product? You look at them and say, how can I extract money from them because I have a product or something like that. And it's a slight difference in thought, but it's a huge difference in attitude and how you deal with people. You know, arrogance. A lot of people think that if you're a leader, you have to come off in a certain way, like you're Braveheart about to lead people into battle or something. And the truth is that people really want to be around good people. Being a good person, and everyone knows what that is because we're born, you know, good people. Everyone knows what a good person is. A lot of people think that you have to be ruthless when it comes to business. And every once in a while, you might have to make an objective decision that's hard emotionally. But you don't have to be ruthless. You have to be, you want to be a good person. You want to collaborate. A lone wolf can become a millionaire, but it takes an army to become a billionaire. It really does.
Let's talk about the collaboration, talk about working with, you know, good people. Like you said, we like to talk about collaboration, and we like to talk about building your network. So how do you find the right people to collaborate with? I mean, and do you have a strategy on networking, and what is that, and how do you follow up with those types of people?
Sure. Yeah. So, you know, like I said, you have to get out there. I mean, you want to be a good person so that you're somebody that people want to do business with, and so that you can enjoy your own presence. But, you know, I personally hate small talk with strangers. I do. It's not that I hate the strangers. I love meeting people. But small talk, like, oh man, look at the weather, you know, you're wasting two people's time because that's not getting anyone anywhere. But if you meet somebody and you find that there's a reason to connect and that there's some kind of shared interest, shared goals, and you get to know them, then that small talk becomes not so small. So what's important is to go out and find people and meet people. And it's not so much a matter of finding opportunities and partnerships. It's actually, you know, it's not, you don't have to go out and look for it so much. You're surrounded by opportunities and surrounded by people who you could partner with. And if you're not, then you need to get into a better group of people or better, you know, environment. But they're out there. And it's more a process of you being creative enough and having enough creative energy to think about, how do I take what's around me and the people I've met and build something really cool together. That mentality is important and takes a lot of training. That's why I mean, it's a strategy, but without the right mentality, you'll never do it. When it comes to what we're looking for at Physna specifically, you know, we're looking for companies that we can help. We're looking for companies that are that create products, companies that manufacture products, you know, because we have to really seriously help them. But I'm not looking at them as like, you're a potential customer who can give me money. I mean, yes, sure, that's why, you know, that's ultimately the point of business. But we think about it a little bit differently. We think about like, what companies are potentially struggling right now with coronavirus, for example. It's a really big problem. It's exposed the fact that we're overly reliant on supply chain in our supply chains on one or two manufacturers or vendors for every item or set of items. And what Physna does, it helps to unravel that and say, hey, wait a minute, actually you have more options. If one's out of business or they're closed down for a few weeks or something, here's another alternative. These people can manufacture that too. Or hey, wait, you've actually got this other part in stock that'll fit for that, or that'll work for that use case. You know, you don't have to actually buy one right now. You're okay. So I think of it like that. I think about how can I help these companies, and we look for companies like that. And because what we have is a foundational technology, there's so many software companies that we can partner with. Like I said, we can't build out every single use case. It's not realistic. But as a platform, right? We have a tool that allows the software world to interact with the physical world around us, and there are so many cases of there's so much value in the physical world and so many types of software, and so few of them can deal with physical objects right now, that we find opportunities for wonderful partnerships everywhere. As long as you look for it, as long as you think about why that would be useful. But one thing I learned in law school that I think is important, and I learned this actually more from experience there and also in business than in schools per se, that there's no such thing as a one-sided contract. That's all that is. It's just a pending lawsuit, right? If both sides aren't super happy with the deal, then you don't have a deal. And again, that goes back to the millionaire versus billionaire mentality, right? So if you have a customer, they've got to be every bit as happy to do business with you and give you their money as you have to be giving them your services and taking their money. And the same is true with partners. You both have to advance together and get mutual benefit out of it for it to be worth anything.
Right. I like that. As we wrap up, I mean, it sounds like a lot of industrial clients too, 3PL and all these logistical partners. That's solid. So if anybody is going to reach out, definitely reach out, probably on LinkedIn, or what's the best way to kind of reach out to you if they have some sort of opportunity to work with you?
LinkedIn's fine. If you can email me, that's typically a little bit faster. You can find my LinkedIn, my email probably on LinkedIn, or just email the company and ask it to be sent to me. They'll send me the email. But LinkedIn's fine. You can look up Paul Powers, Physna, Physna, and you'll find it that way.
Physna. Like that. Can you leave off with a little bit of words to live by, personal mantra or ethos that you can inspire some of the people going through some tough times right now, but to get their business off the ground or whatever it is, how you live your life?
Yeah, we're going through a tough time, which means that we're also going through a time of opportunity, right? Every hardship, it comes with an opportunity at the same time. I guess the most important aspect of how I live my life is I really keep in mind that I've got one. I only have one life. So what motivates me is me personally is moving mankind forward with a leap in technology. And because I know that we're doing that here at Physna, I will wake up every day not knowing how successful we could potentially become. We might be the first quadrillionaire company. Who knows? I mean, you can't argue with me that we couldn't be, right? And because of that, I have this sense of optimism that keeps me alive. And optimism is super valuable. Realism has its place, but pessimism has no value at all. And when I get to view my life, even in coronavirus, as not just a job or not even a career, it's a calling. And my life is my business. And if you don't think that your life is your business, you should really look at how you're spending your time. If you're sleeping 8 hours a day and you're working 16 hours a day, then you have no time when you're away, you're not working. If you're asleep 6 hours and work 16 hours, you have 2 hours a day, and 14-hour days and 8-hour days means you have 2 hours a day too. And a lot of people tell me, well, that's not work-life balance. You need balance. And I keep telling them that's a terrible word. You should stop using it. And the reason why you should stop using it is because being obsessive is a positive thing. As long as you're clear in your mind about what you should be obsessed about. If you only have your career to think of, or your calling, your business to think about, then that makes everything super simple. But if you have two callings, and one is being a great parent or a great family member, then I would challenge you that you don't necessarily have to balance anything. And when people tell me that you do, I come back at them with this, which is, okay, let's say you only had 2 hours a day with your family. Maybe that's not enough. Maybe you need to be more aggressive than that with your family life. But even if you had 2 hours and you decided to spend those 2 hours very, very directly with them, and not sitting together watching a movie, but actually talking to them and discussing things with them, and time, face to face, eye to eye, having a real conversation. 2 hours a day is a lot. Over time, people will probably get a little annoyed talking to you that directly. 2 hours a day, and your business doesn't need you 24 hours a day. You'll get burnt out, and the worst thing for your business is for you to die from being burnt out. So you can pursue 2 things at once, or even 3 potentially, and obsess about them. You don't need to balance.
I like that. I appreciate your time. Where can they find all the information? Is just Physna.com, right?
Correct. Physna.com.
And we'll link that all into the LinkedIn Live bio, the copy. So again, I appreciate your time, and stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll talk to you soon. Appreciate it.
Thanks. You too.
All right.
Take care.